You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fran Brown and recruiting, it just does not stop. It does not rest. Let's start with the biggest one of the three. Chase Geeter, a 6', 180-pound defensive back from Ashburn, Virginia. He is a consensus 3-star recruit, but he's not too far from being a 4-star player. So I do wonder how the recruiting services will continue to rate him going forward, if he'll stay a 3-star or maybe even get bumped up to a 4-star recruit at some point. Because right now, he's rated as the 55th best corner in the country on 24/7 Sports. Not too far, again, from being a 4-star. And also, you got to consider the other schools that were going after Chase Geeter. He chose Syracuse over Duke, Virginia, Wisconsin. He also bypassed an official visit to Michigan this past weekend. So this is a pretty good player that Syracuse football picked up. Definitely the highest rated of the three from this past weekend. And currently on 24/7 Sports, I should say, I apologize. He's the third best player in Syracuse's class, behind Amari Goff and Jarius Rogers. He did mention in his conversation with Mike McAllister on 24/7 Sports how one of the reasons why Chase Geeter ultimately committed to Syracuse football is the fact that Fran Brown is coaching him and that it's very appealing. Why would a defensive back say that? Well, the reason is pretty simple. For those that don't know, Fran Brown's background is with defensive backs. He was the defensive backs coach at Georgia before Syracuse. So that's why it always seems like Syracuse has not a very good chance, but typically a pretty good shot at landing good defensive backs and recruiting because of Fran Brown's background. Actually, going back to last segment, talking about Tedarius Hughes, right? I think it's more important that Fran Brown has his background with defensive backs, more so than the fact that he's a Miami Northwestern guy and Calvin Russell's also a Miami Northwestern guy, and Syracuse has gotten a couple of Miami Northwestern guys in the past. I think Fran Brown's background as a DB's coach matters so much more for DBs than what high school they go to. So Chase Geeter, that's something that he mentioned with Mike McAllister when he committed to Syracuse football very recently. So congratulations to Chase Geeter, along with the other two players that we are about to mention here on this podcast. Next up, you got Carter Bashir, a 6'5", 250-pound tight end from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a consensus 3-star recruit for Syracuse football. He officially visited Syracuse a couple of weeks ago, and he chose the Orange over a few schools like Miami, South Carolina, Duke, and others. And he spoke very highly about Syracuse's culture when he committed to the team. And then finally, we got another specialist that committed in the class of 2026. Shay Baker, 6'2", 190-pound kicker from Pennsylvania. He is the first kicker to commit to Syracuse football in the class of 2026. But like I said, at the top, another specialist. And that's because Syracuse does have a punter in their recruiting class as well, Jimmy Gregg. He just so happens to be the highest rated punter in the country on 24/7 Sports. Again, can't hurt. Can't hurt to have the best punter in the country. You never want to use your punter, but you might have to sometimes. With a guy like Shay Baker, on the other hand, I hope we see him quite a bit. I hope, right? That'd be nice if we saw Shay Baker on the field a lot, but not kicking field goals. I would like him to kick extra points. That would be nice. Field goals aren't terrible. I'd rather a field goal than a punt, but that's neither here nor there, okay? So those are the three players that committed. You got Chase Geeter, a defensive back. You got Carter Bashir, a tight end. And you also got Shay Baker, a kicker. So where does Syracuse's class now stand for the class of 2026 I'm talking about? Good news, and there's really no bad news, so we'll just say just good news. Syracuse football's 2026 class at the time of this recording remains top 30 in the nation on 24/7 Sports. The exact number is 28th. I think a reasonable goal for Syracuse football, and I've said it before here on this podcast, This is now year 3 of recruiting for Fran Brown. I think it's a fair expectation and a fair goal for Syracuse football to have a top 30 overall class in the country, because their first 2 classes were pretty close. In 2024, they were 36th in the nation. 2025, they took a slight step back. I believe they were 42nd in the nation, if my memory serves correct. Right now, they're 28th. They can keep it. Now, it's going to depend on a couple of factors, which I'll get into in just a moment here. But I think, again, it is a fair and reasonable expectation for Fran Brown and Syracuse football to have a top 30 high school recruiting class in the country on 24/7 Sports, or really just any major recruiting service. What are your thoughts? What are your expectations? Where would you like to see it ranked? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. I realize I kind of phrased that question pretty poorly. I mean, I would like to see the class be number 1 in the nation, but I guess I should say, what's a fair expectation? What's reasonable here? I'm not asking Syracuse to go out and out-recruit Georgia. I don't think that's ever going to be possible. But top 30, year 3 of Fran Brown recruiting, I definitely think there's a chance at that. Aside from the rankings, Syracuse currently, again, it's recruiting. Things can change on the dime. I'm recording this about a couple hours before you might be watching or listening to this podcast. But Syracuse has 23 verbal commits so far, with 3 decommits. We'll talk about the decommits more in the next segment. They'll likely need to land Calvin Russell and or Tedarius Hughes to keep a top 30 class. That's my take on it. You land a 5-star wide receiver in Calvin Russell, I think you'll definitely have top 30. You land Tedarius Hughes, probably top 30, maybe just outside of it. You land both, you might be looking at top 25, top 20.